السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. The beautiful month of Ramadan, day after day, increasing our iman, our faith, our rewards by fulfilling the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We learn in the month of Ramadan how to have patience. Fasting is an act of worship that needs patience. Muslims all over the world, we are in so much need of the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have nobody, no one except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to seek the help from no one but the Creator of the heavens and the earth. And the mean to seek this help is by being obedient servants to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Since disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the wrath and the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the humility on this face of earth and the punishment in the hereafter. We have the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam very clear to us. Clear orders from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be obedient servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and clear warnings that if we don't, then humility will be unto the Muslims in this life and in the hereafter. So we need to fulfill the orders of Allah by being obedient to Him. We learn in the month of Ramadan how to change our lives, to adopt the whole religion of Islam by being patient with the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The orders of Allah is something that is for our own benefit. We abstain from eating and drinking and sexual relations throughout the day of Ramadan, seeking the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by being patient. You are hungry, you're thirsty, but you don't go eat and drink. You are patient, holding yourself, controlling yourself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, controlling your own desires till a specific moment comes that is still the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then it is permissible for you and me to eat and drink because this is the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our whole entire life needs to be in the same manner. Servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obedient to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala under any condition, under any circumstance. Whether the person is at home or in school or at work or in the streets, whether he is in a Muslim country or a non-Muslim country, it doesn't matter. He needs to be an obedient slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that needs patience. And this is the time for us, the opportunity, a great opportunity, for us to acquire this level of patience. When abstaining from food and drink, we learn how to be patient. Patience or sabr is mentioned in the Quran in many, many verses. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran that He would give the rewards for those who are patient without limits. إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. That the rewards for the patient ones is without limits. It's endless rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show such a great quality that the believer should acquire. And that's why, as the ulama they say, fasting is such an act of worship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the reward for the fasting without limits. As it's mentioned in the hadith Qudsi, الصَّوْمُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجِزِي بِهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, in the meaning of which, fasting is exclusively for me, and I would give the rewards for it. Unlimited reward. Because it's an act of worship that makes the person, shows the sincere one by enduring patience. Patience is of three types. Patient when it comes to the obedience of the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Being patient in refraining oneself from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And being patient when it comes to the calamities and the afflictions that would afflict the person throughout this life. The most rewardable type of patience is the first two. Is the one that we choose to do. When a person is afflicted with a calamity, he seeks patience so that he would feel good about himself, so that he doesn't want to live a life of miserable. a misery, but instead he would seek patience. But when it comes to the choosing acts of worship, and the person would choose to fast for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and endure patience in fulfilling this order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is far more rewards than the third type. And also when a person refrains from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said that in the story of Yusuf, Prophet Joseph alayhi salam, his patience when he was faced by the wife of the leader of Egypt, when she tried to seduce him, his patience of being away from such a sin is far more rewards than his patience when he was thrown into the well, when his brothers threw him into the well. Why? Because when he was in the well, he didn't have any other choice but to seek patience from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also this is a sign of the believers, not to undermine patience when it comes to calamity afflicting the believers. But the far more rewards when he chose to be patient. When he had all the means to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Young, being a stranger at a land in which if he do the acts of sin, he won't be blamed for it. He is being ordered by the slave owner. And plus, the wife of the leader of Egypt, she was a beautiful woman. And because of all of these means, he still chose to be patient and to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes you see some of the Muslims, with the slightest way of desires, they would leave the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a way of injustice that we commit against our own selves. So we need to seek patience from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the month of Ramadan, and we train ourselves by fulfilling the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fasting in the month of Ramadan every day for 30 days or 29 days. We do that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we practice this act of being patient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran that He loves those who have patience. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in the hadith, the meaning of which that those who have patience are the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, and so on and so forth. It's important for us. It's important for us to seek the patience from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to ponder over the wisdom behind fasting, because it elevates the person. Now, if you are patient in abstaining from eating and drinking, then you should be patient, more likely to be patient, from committing evil acts. And this is the benefit that we take from the month of Ramadan. We are patient during the day in fasting. We are patient during the night, abstaining from a lot of sleep. But instead we would stand in the salah, in the night prayer. And that's why in the day of judgment, as it's mentioned in the meaning of a hadith, authentic hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ said, in the meaning of which, that fasting and the Quran, both will intercede for the person in the day of judgment. The fasting would say, I made him abstain from eating and drinking. And Quran would say, I made him abstain from sleeping. And these are the actions that we do in Ramadan. Fasting and standing at night and making salah. Ways of showing how the believer should be patient when it comes to the orders of Allah. And this is of a great benefit. Changes the life of the believer to make him a better individual, to make him acquire the different acts of worship, to be a slave of Allah, a servant of Allah that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times, at all circumstances. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who are patient, and to accept our deeds, our fasting, and our night prayers in the month of Ramadan and at all times. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله 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 الله